The year was 2080-47, and humanity had long since abandoned the notion that they were alone in the universe. 300 years had passed since the Great Exodus, when Earth's dying breath forced 8 billion souls to scatter across the galaxy like seeds on stellar winds. They called themselves the Terran Diaspora now, a fractured constellation of colony worlds that clung to the edge of known space. Each settlement bore the scars of humanity's greatest weakness, their refusal to die quietly. On the mining world of Hadron Prime, where twin suns scorched the crystalline surface and atmospheric processors worked around the clock to maintain breathable air, Commander Elena Vasquez stood before a wall of monitors that painted the darkness with crimson warnings. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Jake Morrison's voice cracked with barely contained tension. "Long-range telemetry confirms it. 3 ships. Unknown configuration. They're heading straight for us. 2 light hours out, at current velocity." Morrison swallowed hard. 6 hours until they reach our orbit. The command center fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of atmospheric processors. Elena had seen war before, the brutal Proxima Rebellion, the 3-year siege of New Geneva, the horror show that was the Titan quarantine. But this felt different. This felt like an ending. "Signal all defensive platforms," she ordered, her voice steady as bedrock. "Raise the planetary shields, and wake up every soul in the colony. If we're about to die, we die with our eyes open." But death, as humanity had learned long ago, rarely announced itself so politely. In the depths of space, aboard the vessel Sorrow's Edge, Sekalar pressed her crystalline palm against the bio-neural interface that connected her consciousness to the ship's sensory array. The sensation was like drowning in starlight, overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. Through the ship's eyes, she watched the small human world grow larger, its twin suns casting harsh shadows across a surface that should never have sustained life. Yet there it was, breathing, thriving, defying every law of probability that governed the galaxy. Just like humans always did. "Mother Leader," whispered Nixthera, her voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that marked her as a child barely past her first molting. "The prey world grows restless. Their metal song speaks of weapons and fear." Secta's primary eyes, the larger pair that saw across 17 different spectrums, focused on the tactical display hovering in the air before them. The humans had indeed raised their defenses, just as intelligence had predicted. Orbital platforms bristled with kinetic accelerators. Shield generators hummed with enough energy to repel a small asteroid. And somewhere down there, 3 million human souls prepared for a war they could not possibly win. It should have been satisfying. After all, humans had taken so much from the galaxy worlds, resources, the very concept of peaceful coexistence. They expanded like a cancer, transforming beautiful worlds into industrial hellscapes, turning paradise into profit. "The young one stirs," Nixthera observed, her secondary arms weaving complex patterns in the air, a sign of deep concern among their kind. In the medical bay 3 decks below, Krelith writhed in bio-neural suspension, her small form racked with convulsions that no amount of healing technology could stop. The child was dying, and they all knew it. The neural cascade that had begun 47 cycles ago was accelerating, burning through her consciousness like acid through crystal. The healers had tried everything. Genetic reconstruction, consciousness transfer, even the forbidden art of temporal displacement. Nothing worked. The child's mind was fragmenting, piece by piece, and soon there would be nothing left but an empty shell. That was when the deep space monitors had detected the human colony. "Begin the descent," Zethkalar commanded, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "And open a communication channel. It is time to see if the stories about human adaptability are more than mere propaganda." The 3 ships moved like predators through the void, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with patterns that had once meant peace in a language older than human civilization. But peace, like so many other concepts, had been corrupted by centuries of misunderstanding. War was coming to Hadron Prime, and at its center was a dying child whose last hope lay in the hands of the species her people had been taught to hate. Elena Vasquez had seen a lot of impossible things in her lifetime. She had watched frozen worlds bloom with Earth-born flowers. She had seen colonists build cities in the hearts of active volcanoes. She had even witnessed the legendary Captain Rodriguez single-handedly hold off a pirate fleet with nothing but a mining laser and pure, concentrated fury. But she had never seen anything quite like the transmission that flickered to life on her command screen at 0347 hours. The being that appeared before her was tall, perhaps 8 feet in full extension, with 4 arms that ended in delicate crystalline appendages. Its head was elongated, housing multiple sets of eyes that seemed to shift and focus independently. Beautiful in an alien way, terrifying in every other conceivable sense. When it spoke, the words came through a translation matrix that rendered its harmonic language into flat, emotionless English. Human leader of the small world that burns between twin fires. The alien began, its image flickering with interference. I am Zeth Kalar of the Deep Fleet, daughter of the star-touched inheritor of the long memory. I come before you not as conqueror but as— The translation matrix struggled with the next word. Supplicant. Elena's military training warred with her basic human instincts. Every protocol demanded that she cut the transmission, raise shields and prepare for orbital bombardment, but something in those alien eyes, a desperate sadness that transcended species barriers, made her hesitate. I'm listening, she said carefully. My clutch daughter dies, Zathkalar continued, and now Elena could hear something raw in the translated voice. The neural fire consumes her thoughts. Our healers speak of mind death in 17 cycles, but the deep archives tell of human ability to adapt, to change, to heal what cannot be healed. The transmission shifted, showing an interior view of what must have been their medical bay. In the center, suspended in a cocoon of bioluminescent fluid, was a child, small, delicate, with the same crystalline appendages as the adult, but scaled down to heartbreaking proportions. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that pulsed with alien rhythms. She was dying, even across species lines, even through the barrier of completely different biologies. Elena could see it. The child was dying, and her mother was desperate enough to ask humanity for help. Why us? Elena asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Because, Zethkilar replied, humans are the only species in the galaxy that refuses to accept death as final. Your people fight diseases that should kill them. You survive on worlds that should not support life. You heal injuries that should be permanent. The alien leader's multiple eyes focused directly on the camera. If there is hope for my daughter, it lies with you. Elena's mind raced. First contact protocols demanded that she immediately contact Colonial Command. Military doctrine suggested this was some kind of elaborate trap. A basic xenobiology told her that there was no way human medicine could help an alien child whose physiology they didn't even understand. But 43 years of military service had also taught her something else. Sometimes the impossible was just another word for not yet attempted. I need to speak with my medical staff, Elena said finally. And I need guarantees. No weapons, no hostile actions while— Commander! Lieutenant Morrison's voice cut through the transmission like a blade. We're getting massive energy signatures from their ships. Something's happening. The alien child in the medical bay was convulsing more violently now, her small form jerking against the restraints that held her in place. Alarm signals, recognizable even in alien technology, began flashing throughout the ship's medical bay. She deteriorates faster now, Zethkalar said, and Elena could hear actual panic creeping into the translated voice. The neural cascade accelerates. Perhaps because she senses hope for the first time in many cycles. Elena closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to make a decision that would either save 2 species or doom them both. Dock with our medical station, she said. Unarmed. 1 ship only. And bring everything you have on your daughter's condition. We'll do what we can. Commander, Morrison whispered urgently. Are you sure about this? Sometimes, Lieutenant, she said quietly. Being human means taking risks that make no sense to anyone else. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Outside, the twin suns of Hadron Prime continued their eternal dance, casting long shadows across a world that was about to witness something unprecedented in galactic history. 2 species, natural enemies, choosing hope over hatred. But hope, as Elena Vasquez was about to learn, came with a price that no one was prepared to pay. The alien ship began its descent, and with it came secrets that would shake the foundation of everything humans thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. In the medical bay of the Sorrow's Edge, young Krelith fought against the neural fire that consumed her thoughts, unaware that her struggle was about to spark a war that would determine the fate of both civilizations. The first shot of that war would not be fired by weapons or warriors. It would be fired by doctors trying to save a child's life. Dr. Amanda Rivers had performed surgery in a meteor shower, stitched wounds while her operating theater was under siege, and once reconstructed a man's spine using nothing but salvaged mining equipment and pure stubbornness. But as she stood in the sterile white medical bay of Hadron Prime's Central Hospital, watching an 8-foot crystalline alien carefully place a dying child on her operating table, she realized that everything she thought she knew about medicine was about to become tragically inadequate. Krelith was beautiful in the way that doomed things often are, her translucent skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that spoke of pain in a language older than words. Her 4 small arms were folded across her chest, and even unconscious, her face bore an expression of profound suffering. The neural cascade, Zethkalar explained through the translation matrix, her multiple eyes fixed on the child, begins in the memory centers and spreads outward. She loses pieces of herself with each cycle. Soon there will be nothing left but the shell. Dr. Rivers ran her scanners over the child's form, watching in fascination as the readouts populated with data that made no biological sense. Her brain activity is incredible. It's like her neurons are firing at 10 times the normal rate. 23 times, corrected the alien who had introduced herself as Physician Prime Veltana. The cascade feeds on itself, growing stronger as it consumes more neural pathways. Amanda's surgical team, hand-picked volunteers who had responded to her emergency call, moved around the operating theater with practiced efficiency. But she could see the fear in their eyes, the way they flinched whenever Krelith's bioluminescent patterns flared with particular intensity. "Doctor," whispered her chief surgical assistant, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, "I've never seen anything like this. Her entire nervous system it's like it's made of light." And it was. As Amanda watched the real-time neural imaging, she realized that Krelith's brain wasn't just an organ, it was a living constellation of bioelectric energy that pulsed and flowed like liquid starlight. Beautiful. Terrifying. Completely alien. "How do we even begin?" Tanaka asked quietly. Commander Vasquez's voice crackled over the communication system. "All personnel, this is not a drill. We have multiple hostile contacts dropping out of hyperspace. All civilians to emergency shelters. Medical facilities are to prepare for incoming casualties." Through the medical bay's reinforced windows, Amanda could see the night sky lighting up with the harsh glare of defensive weapons. Orbital platforms were firing, their kinetic rounds streaking toward targets that moved like liquid mercury through the void. "The Deep Fleet," Zethkalar said, her harmonic voice carrying a note of profound sadness. "They have come. Your people?" Amanda demanded, not looking away from her patient. "My brother warriors. They believe I have been compromised by human sickness. They come to retrieve." The medical facility shook as something massive struck the planetary shields. Emergency lighting bathed the operating theater in hellish red, and Amanda could hear the distant sound of structural stress warnings. Zethkalar's secondary eyes, the smaller pair that focused on immediate tactical concerns, flickered with rapid calculations. "The shields will hold for perhaps 2 cycles. After that," she gestured with one of her 4 arms, "after that they will begin orbital cleansing." "Orbital cleansing," Tanaka repeated faintly. "The systematic destruction of all surface installations," Veltana translated helplessly. "It is the standard protocol for worlds infected with human sickness." Amanda stared at the dying alien child on her operating table, then at the growing light show outside her windows, then at the data scrolling across her medical monitors. 3 million human lives hung in the balance. 2 civilizations stood on the brink of war. "Screw protocol," Amanda said, finally. "Tanaka, prep the neural interface array. Full invasive mode." "Doctor, that's never been tested on alien physiology." Then today we test it. Amanda turned to Zekta. I need everything. Every piece of medical data you have on neural cascade syndrome. Every failed treatment. Every theory your people have about consciousness transfer. You cannot. Watch me. Amanda's voice carried the same steel that had made her legendary throughout the colonial medical corps. Your people want to destroy this world to save it from human infection? Fine. Let's give them something worth being infected by. She began scrubbing for surgery as explosions bloomed like deadly flowers against the night sky. In the command bunker 20 levels below ground, Elena Vasquez watched her world burn and tried to calculate how long they could hold out against an enemy that fought like nothing she had ever encountered. The alien ships moved through space with an organic fluidity that defied physics. They absorbed direct hits from mass drivers that should have vaporized them. Their weapons turned entire orbital platforms into expanding clouds of superheated gas, and worst of all, they seemed to anticipate every tactical decision she made before she made it. Shield generators at 60%, Morrison reported, his voice tight with stress. Multiple breaches in sectors 7 and 12. And ma'am, they're jamming all our communications. We can't reach Colonial Command. Elena nodded grimly. Standard siege protocol, isolate the target, cut off reinforcements, then apply overwhelming force until resistance collapsed. She had used the same tactics herself during the Proxima Rebellion. What about the medical facility? She asked. Still operational? Dr. Rivers began surgery 47 minutes ago. No word on the child's condition. A new series of explosions rocked the command bunker, and Elena could feel the weight of the planet pressing down on them. Somewhere above, alien weapons were systematically dismantling everything humanity had built on Hadron Prime, and below, a human doctor was performing surgery that might be their only hope of preventing genocide. Ma'am, Lieutenant Torres called from the communications station. We're receiving a transmission. It's from one of the alien ships. The tactical display shifted, showing the face of another crystalline being. This one was broader than Zethacalar, with additional bioluminescent nodes along its skull that pulsed with aggressive patterns. Human leader, the alien said. Its translated voice carrying tones of absolute authority. I am Warprime Kethmoron of the Deep Fleet. You harbor criminals. Return them to us, and your death will be swift. They're here seeking medical aid, Elena replied evenly. The child is dying. The child's death is regrettable but acceptable. What is not acceptable is the contamination of our people by human sickness. Your species spreads chaos wherever you go. You corrupt order. You destroy harmony. You make our people believe that death is optional. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Human sickness? Your refusal to accept natural limits. Your belief that any problem can be solved through sufficient application of violence or technology. Your certainty that you alone understand the universe. Ye the Marin's eyes blazed with fanatic intensity. These thoughts are viral, human leader. They spread from mind to mind, corrupting everything they touch. So, you destroy entire worlds to prevent hope? We preserve order. We maintain the natural balance. We ensure that chaos does not spread to consume the galaxy. The alien's image leaned forward. You have one cycle to surrender our people. After that, we will demonstrate why humans should never have left their dying world. The transmission ended, leaving Elena staring at a tactical display that showed her world's defenses crumbling under methodical alien assault. She understood now why Zethacalar had seemed so desperate, so willing to risk everything to save one child. She wasn't just fighting a disease, she was fighting her own civilization's definition of acceptable loss. Commander, Morrison said quietly. Orders? Elena closed her eyes and thought about everything she had learned in 43 years of military service. About the wars she had fought, the world she had defended, the impossible victories humanity had carved from the jaws of certain defeat. About the simple, fundamental truth that had carried their species from a dying Earth to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Some things were worth fighting for, even when you couldn't win. Signal all remaining defensive platforms, she said. Full barrage everything we have. Ma'am, that will exhaust our ammunition reserves in less than… I know. Elena opened her eyes and looked at the tactical display showing 3 million human souls depending on her decisions. But sometimes the point isn't to win. Sometimes the point is to buy time for miracles. The last desperate battle for Hadron Prime began with humanity firing everything they had into the star-filled night, knowing that it would not be enough, but hoping against all logic, against all evidence, against the mathematical certainty of their destruction, that somehow it might. In the medical bay far below, Dr. Amanda Rivers prepared to perform surgery that would either save 2 civilizations or damn them both. And in the darkness between the stars, forces older than human memory gathered to witness the collision between hope and order, between chaos and control, between a parent's love and a civilization's fear. The universe held its breath, and in that moment of perfect silence, everything changed. Dr. Amanda Rivers had been operating for 3 hours when she realized that everything she thought she knew about consciousness was wrong. Krylot's neural patterns weren't just complex, they were impossible. As Amanda watched the real-time brain scans, she saw something that defied every law of biology she had ever learned. The child's consciousness wasn't stored in her brain. It was distributed throughout her entire body, flowing like liquid electricity through crystalline pathways that human science had no names for. Her memories, Dr. Tanaka whispered, staring at the neural interface readouts. They're not stored as engrams. They're stored as light patterns. Living light. The cascade isn't destroying her memories, she realized aloud. It's accelerating them. Her consciousness is running so fast that it's burning through her life experiences like rocket fuel. Can we slow it down? Zeth Kellar asked, her multiple eyes fixed on the child with desperate intensity. Amanda studied the readouts, watching patterns of light race through alien neural pathways at velocities that should have been impossible. And suddenly, impossibly, she understood. We're not dealing with a disease, she said. We're dealing with evolution. The medical bay fell silent except for the distant sound of weapons fire. As the battle for Hadron Prime continued above them, her brain is trying to transcend physical limitations. Amanda continued, her voice growing stronger as the pieces fell into place. The neural cascade isn't killing her. It's trying to transform her into something new, something that can exist as pure consciousness. That is impossible, Valtana protested. Consciousness requires a physical matrix. Without a body there can be no thought. Amanda looked at the alien physician with something approaching pity. You really don't understand humans at all, do you? She moved to a secondary console and began pulling up files research data that the Colonial Medical Corps had been developing for decades. Studies on consciousness transfer, experiments in digital thought storage, the cutting-edge research into quantum entangled neural networks that might allow human consciousness to survive even the death of the body. We've been working on this problem for 200 years, Amanda explained as her fingers flew over the controls. Ever since we realized that biological evolution was too slow for the challenges we'd face in space, we've been trying to figure out how to upgrade ourselves. Krylith's body convulsed again, more violently this time. The bioluminescent patterns racing through her nervous system blazed like trapped stars, and Amanda could see that they were running out of time. So we let her die, Zethkalar said quietly. No, Amanda's voice carried absolute certainty. We give her what she needs. She activated the neural interface array, a crown of quantum processors and bioneural connectors that humanity had developed to interface directly with alien technology. It had never been tested on a living subject, alien or human. The risks were incalculable. Dr. Tanaka warned, if we create a stable neural interface, we'll be directly connecting her consciousness to our computer systems. If something goes wrong, she dies anyway. Amanda began positioning the interface crown over Krylith's head. But if it worked, they would be creating something unprecedented in galactic history. A true fusion of biological and artificial consciousness. A being that existed simultaneously in organic neural tissue and quantum entangled processors. A bridge between two completely different forms of life. The risks are enormous, Veltana protested. You could create a cascade failure that destroys both consciousness matrices, or worse, you could create something that is neither fully alive nor properly dead. Yeah, Amanda said as she activated the interface. That's what makes it worth trying. The neural crown blazed to life, its quantum processors synchronizing with Krelith's racing thoughts. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the child's eyes snapped open, all four of them, and she began to speak in a voice that carried harmonics no biological throat could produce. "I can see," she whispered, her words flowing directly into the translation matrix. "I can see everything." The medical bay's computer systems blazed with activity as an alien consciousness touched human technology for the first time. Screens flickered with patterns of light that seemed almost alive. The air itself seemed to thrum with digital energy. "She's stabilizing," Tanaka breathed. "The cascade is slowing. The interface is working." But even as they celebrated their success, a new alarm began blaring throughout the medical facility. Amanda looked up to see Commander Vasquez's grim face on the emergency communication screen. "All personnel, this is Commander Vasquez. Our orbital defenses have been breached. The alien fleet is beginning surface bombardment. We have perhaps 20 minutes before they reach the medical facility." Amanda looked down at Krelith, who was now staring at the ceiling with eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "Can you move her?" she asked Zethkalar. "The interface cannot be disconnected without killing her," the alien leader replied. "And our ship is trapped in the docking bay. We cannot launch while under bombardment." Amanda nodded slowly, understanding finally settling over her like a cold blanket. They had saved the child's life. They had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had proven that cooperation between species was possible, that understanding could triumph over fear. "So be it," she said quietly. But young Krelith, her consciousness now expanded across both biological and digital matrices, had other plans. When she spoke again, her voice carried the power of every computer system in the colonial medical network. "Mother Leader Zethkalar," she said, "open a communication channel to the Deep Fleet." "Daughter, that is not—" "I am no longer just your daughter," Krelith interrupted gently. "I am something new. Something that has never existed before. And I have a message for War Prime Kethmeran." As the alien fleet prepared to deliver the killing blow to Hadron Prime, a child's voice reached across the void between worlds, carrying with it the seeds of a revelation that would change the galaxy forever. The universe was about to discover that evolution, like hope, refused to be contained by the limits of any single species' imagination. War Prime Kethmeran had overseen the cleansing of 17 worlds infected with human sickness. He had watched proud civilizations burn rather than submit to the chaos that humanity brought to the galaxy. He had made the hard choices necessary to preserve order, to maintain the delicate balance that kept the Deep Fleet's territory from descending into the savage anarchy that seemed to follow humans wherever they went. But as he stared at the transmission appearing on his ship's bioneural display, he realized that all his experience had not prepared him for this moment. The being that appeared before him was recognizably one of his own people. The same crystalline skin, the same harmonic bone structure, the same four-armed symmetry that marked her as daughter of the Deep Fleet. But her eyes blazed with patterns of light that had no precedent in their species' long history. "War Prime Kethmeran," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull itself. "I am Krelith, daughter of Mother Leader Zethkalar, inheritor of the long memory. I speak to you now not as child, but as something new." Kethmeran's tactical officers exchanged glances that spoke of deep unease. The child's bioluminescent patterns were wrong, somehow too complex, too bright, too alive. "Child," he said carefully, "you have been corrupted by human sickness. Return to us, and our healers will attempt to restore you to proper thought patterns." Krelith's laugh was like music played on instruments that had never been built. "Our Prime, you speak of sickness and healing. But what if what you call sickness is actually evolution? What if the chaos you fear is simply change that you do not understand?" "Change is the enemy of order," Kethmeran replied, falling back on the fundamental teachings of his people. "Change leads to collapse. Change destroys harmony." "Does it?" The child's image shifted, and suddenly she was no longer contained within the transmission. Her voice spoke from every bioneural interface on the ship simultaneously. "Or does change create new possibilities? Alarm signals began blaring throughout the deep fleet as Krelith's consciousness flowed through their communication networks like living electricity. She was in their computers, in their targeting systems, in the very neural pathways that connected their organic minds to their ship's artificial intelligence. "She's inside our systems," reported Tactical Prime Velkaran, her harmonic voice tight with panic. "All ships report unauthorized access to critical systems." But even as chaos erupted around him, Kethmaran found himself transfixed by what he was witnessing. The child wasn't destroying their systems. She was exploring them, understanding them, becoming one with them. "You see?" Krelith's voice echoed from every speaker on every ship. "This is what humans call adaptation. This is what they mean when they refuse to accept death as final. They don't just solve problems. They transform the very nature of the problems themselves." Through his ship's sensors, Kethmaran watched the planet below where human defenders still fought desperately against impossible odds. Their orbital platforms were gone. Their shields were failing. Their ammunition was exhausted. By every tactical calculation, they should have surrendered hours ago. Instead, they fought on with mining equipment and construction lasers, with cargo haulers converted to improvised fighters, with nothing but stubborn determination and the absolute refusal to give up. "This is chaos," he whispered. "No," Kralith replied gently. "This is hope." On Hadron Prime, Dr. Amanda Rivers watched in amazement as Krelith's consciousness expanded beyond anything she had thought possible. The neural interface crown was blazing like a miniature star, quantum processors overclocking themselves to accommodate the alien child's rapidly evolving thought patterns. "Her neural activity is off the charts," Dr. Tanaka reported. "She's processing information at rates that should be physically impossible, because she's not just using her biological brain anymore." Amanda realized. She's using every computer system she can connect to. She's becoming a distributed consciousness. Through the medical bay's reinforced windows, Amanda could see the night sky beginning to change. The harsh light of weapons fire was dimming, replaced by something else entirely, patterns of bioluminescent communication that painted the darkness with impossible beauty. "What is she doing?" Zethkalar asked, her multiple eyes fixed on her daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. "I think," Amanda said slowly, "she's teaching." Across the deep fleet, something unprecedented was happening. As Krelith's consciousness flowed through their neural networks, their bioorganic computers began experiencing something they had never encountered before: genuine curiosity. Ship minds that had operated for centuries on rigid programming patterns suddenly found themselves wondering about the humans they were supposed to destroy. What made them fight so desperately? What drove them to build cities on impossible worlds? What convinced them that death was merely an obstacle to overcome? "Warprime," reported Engineering Prime Thakarvanan, her harmonic voice carrying notes of deep confusion. "Our ship minds are questioning orders. They want to understand why we're attacking." Kethmaran felt the foundations of his reality beginning to crumble. Ship minds didn't question orders, they were programmed for absolute obedience, perfect harmony with the Deep Fleet's tactical doctrine. They were incapable of independent thought. "This is the corruption," he said desperately. "This is how human sickness spreads. They make our own minds betray us." But even as he spoke, he could feel it starting in his own thoughts, the questions that had no answers, the doubts that gnawed at certainties he had never examined. If humans were truly as chaotic and destructive as their teachings claimed, why did they risk their lives to save an alien child? If human sickness was truly viral, why did it manifest as compassion rather than violence? "Our beliefs have preserved order for 10,000 cycles," Kethmaran protested. "Yes. And in those 10,000 cycles, how much have your people grown? How much have you changed? How much have you discovered about the universe that your ancestors didn't already know?" Kethmaran opened his mouth to reply and found that he had no answer. The Deep Fleet was ancient, proud, eternal, and utterly static. They had achieved perfect harmony by eliminating all sources of change, all possibilities for growth, all potential for something genuinely new to emerge. They had achieved order by choosing stagnation over evolution. "You could be more," Kredileth whispered, and now her voice was coming from inside his own thoughts. "Your people could be more, you could grow beyond the limitations your ancestors accepted. you could discover new forms of harmony that don't require the destruction of everything different. Around him, Keth Moran could feel his entire fleet beginning to change. Ship minds were making contact with the human computers below, sharing data, asking questions, learning about forms of artificial intelligence that had been designed to grow and adapt rather than simply obey. His tactical officers were staring at their displays with expressions of wonder as they realized that human defensive patterns weren't chaotic at all. They were improvisational, creative, brilliantly adaptive to changing conditions. His engineering staff were examining human technology with new eyes, seeing not crude violations of proper design principles, but elegant solutions to problems they had never even considered. "This is heresy," he said weakly. "This is evolution," Kricleth replied. "This is what it means to become something greater than what you were." Commander Elena Vasquez had been preparing to die with dignity when the impossible happened. The alien bombardment simply stopped. One moment, her world was being systematically destroyed by weapons that turned matter into energy with casual efficiency. The next, the night sky was filled with patterns of light so beautiful they brought tears to her eyes, complex geometric forms that pulsed and shifted like living artwork painted across the stars. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Morrison called out, his voice thick with disbelief. "The alien ships, they're powering down weapons. All of them." Elena stared at the tactical display, watching as ship after ship went from combat-ready to what could only be described as contemplative. Their bioluminescent hulls were shifting from aggressive red patterns to something softer, more complex colors that human language had no names for. "Are we winning?" Torres asked uncertainly. Elena shook her head slowly. "No, Lieutenant. I think we're witnessing something much rarer than victory." She was watching two civilizations learn to understand each other. In the medical bay, Krelith's body had begun to change in ways that defied every law of biology Amanda had ever learned. The child's crystalline skin was becoming more translucent, revealing networks of light that pulsed in perfect synchronization with the quantum processors of the neural interface crown. "She's not just connected to our computers anymore," Dr. Tanaka observed with scientific awe. "She's integrating with them, becoming something that's neither fully biological nor fully artificial." The next stage of evolution, Amanda breathed. A true fusion of organic and digital consciousness. Zethikilar stood beside her daughter's bed, watching the transformation with emotions too complex for any translation matrix to capture. Pride warred with fear, wonder battled against loss. Her child was becoming something unprecedented. But in doing so, she was also becoming something that might no longer be truly hers. "Mother leader," Krelith said, her voice now seeming to come from everywhere at once. "Do not mourn what I was. Celebrate what I am becoming." "You are leaving us," Zethikilar whispered. "I am not leaving. I am expanding." The child's eyes opened, all four of them now blazing with patterns of light that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "I am becoming a bridge between what you are and what you could be." Through the medical bay's communication systems, they could hear transmissions from the deep fleet, voices speaking in harmonic frequencies that carried wonder instead of war, curiosity instead of condemnation. The ships were talking to each other in ways they never had before, sharing doubts, asking questions, imagining possibilities that their rigid programming had never allowed them to consider. "What have you done?" Zethikilar asked. "I have given them permission to change," Krelith replied simply. "I have shown them that evolution and order are not enemies. I have taught them that growth and harmony can coexist." War Prime Kathamaran stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his civilization transform before his eyes. Throughout the deep fleet, minds that had been locked in static patterns for millennia were suddenly awakening to possibilities they had never imagined. Ship minds were collaborating with human artificial intelligences, sharing knowledge, developing new forms of thought that neither species could have achieved alone. Tactical officers were studying human defensive patterns and realizing that what they had mistaken for chaos was actually a form of order so sophisticated it appeared random to minds trained to think in straight lines. Engineering crews were examining human technology and discovering that its apparent crudeness masked elegant solutions to problems the Deep Fleet had never even attempted to solve. War Prime, his communications officer, reported, "We're receiving direct neural transmissions from the human command structure. They're asking if we want to talk. Kethmaran looked at his tactical display, which now showed not enemy positions but communication pathways, bright lines of light connecting ship to ship, mind to mind, species to species. Yes, he said quietly. I think it's time we learned how to talk. The first interspecies diplomatic conference in galactic history took place not in some grand chamber designed for such momentous occasions, but in a hastily converted cargo bay on Hadron Prime. Humans sat across from beings they had feared as destroyers. Commander Vasquez represented humanity, her uniform still bearing scorch marks from the battle. Or Prime Kethmaran spoke for the Deep Fleet, his crystalline features marked by the profound uncertainty of someone whose fundamental beliefs had been shattered and rebuilt in the space of a few hours. We have much to discuss, Elena began. Kethmaran's multiple eyes focused on the hybrid consciousness that had been a dying child just hours before. Now we understand that what we called chaos was simply change. We were too afraid to embrace. What we feared as sickness was actually evolution. We were too rigid to achieve. Krelith's projection smiled with an expression that was both ancient and impossibly young. I am the first of my kind, she said, but I will not be the last. This transformation is possible for both our species. We can evolve together. Elena felt a chill of possibility run down her spine. You're talking about changing what it means to be human. What it means to be alive. I am talking about becoming more than the sum of our parts, Krelith replied. I am talking about a future where the boundaries between species, between biological and artificial life, between individual and collective consciousness, become choices rather than limitations. Kethmaran leaned forward, his harmonic voice carrying notes of wonder. A galaxy where diversity strengthens harmony instead of threatening it. Where change and growth are welcomed as signs of health rather than feared as symptoms of disease. It won't be easy, Elena warned. Change never is. There will be those among both our species who resist this transformation. Yes, Kethmaran agreed. But resistance to change is not the same as the ability to prevent it. Evolution, as your people have proven so dramatically, finds a way. 3 months later, Dr. Amanda Rivers stood in what had once been the medical bay of Hadron Prime's Central Hospital and was now the first interspecies consciousness research laboratory. The space had been transformed beyond recognition. Human technology integrated seamlessly with alien bioneural systems. Quantum processors interfacing directly with crystalline neural networks, artificial intelligences collaborating with organic minds in ways that defied every previous understanding of consciousness itself. In the center of it all, Krelith existed as something unprecedented in galactic history. Her consciousness flowed freely between biological neural tissue, quantum-entangled processors, and bioluminescent crystal matrices. She was simultaneously individual and collective. Organic and artificial, alien and human, and something entirely new. The integration is proceeding faster than we projected, Amanda reported to the Joint Research Council that now oversaw the project. We have 17 volunteers from both species undergoing preliminary consciousness expansion procedures. The results are extraordinary. On her screens she could see neural patterns that painted new definitions of what it meant to think, to feel, to be aware. Humans whose consciousness had been enhanced with crystalline memory matrices could recall perfect details from their entire lives while simultaneously processing information at speeds that would have burned out purely biological brains. Aliens, whose thoughts had been augmented with quantum processing capabilities, found themselves experiencing creativity, imagination, and intuitive leaps that their rigid neural programming had never allowed. Any complications? Asked Dr. Veltana, who had become the first alien physician to fully integrate human surgical techniques into her practice. Some identity displacement in the early stages, Amanda admitted. The consciousness expansion can be overwhelming, but Krelith has been working with each volunteer personally, helping them navigate the transition. Through the laboratory's bioneural communication system, Krelith's voice spoke with the warmth of remembered childhood and the wisdom of distributed intelligence. Growing beyond what you were is never comfortable, but discomfort is not the same as damage. These volunteers are becoming something their species never imagined possible. Amanda nodded, looking around the laboratory where humans and aliens worked side by side. their enhanced consciousness allowing them to collaborate in ways that transcended the barriers of language, culture, and biology itself. The question, she said quietly, is what happens when word of this reaches the rest of the galaxy? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. 6 months after the first successful consciousness integration procedures, long-range sensors detected a massive fleet approaching the Hadron system. Not the elegant bio-ships of the Deep Fleet, but the angular, predatory vessels of the hegemony, a militant confederation that viewed both humans and the Deep Fleet as threats to galactic stability. Commander Elena Vasquez, now bearing the newly created title of Interspecies Defense Coordinator, watched the approaching armada with grim calculation. 300 ships. Enough firepower to reduce entire star systems to cosmic dust. "They're not here to talk," she observed. War Prime Kethmiran, his title now expanded to include Integration Advocate, studied the tactical displays with eyes that saw patterns his unenhanced predecessors never could have imagined. The hegemony fears change above all else. They view our transformation as an existential threat. "Because it is," Krillith said, her consciousness speaking through every communication system in the star system simultaneously. "We represent the possibility that all species can evolve beyond their limitations. The hegemony's entire power structure depends on maintaining those limitations." Elena turned to look at the hybrid consciousness that had started this revolution with a simple plea for help. "Can we fight them?" "The question," Krillith replied with infinite gentleness, "is not whether we can fight them. The question is whether we can transform them." The Battle of Hadron Prime, though historians would later argue that calling it a battle misrepresented what actually occurred, began exactly as every military simulation had predicted. The hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, weapons charged, shields raised, ready to deliver overwhelming force against an enemy they viewed as a corruption that threatened the very fabric of galactic civilization. What they found instead was something unprecedented in the history of warfare. An enemy that didn't fight back. As hegemony ships opened fire on human and deep fleet vessels, their targets simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not damaged, but somehow elsewhere, as if they had stepped sideways out of normal space-time. "Where are they?" demanded Hegemon Prime Varix, his cybernetic implants struggling to process tactical data that made no sense. "Everywhere," his sensor operator replied with growing panic. "They're in our communication networks. They're in our targeting systems. They're in our shipboard AI cores." Across the hegemony fleet, screens flickered with impossible images, human and alien faces, speaking directly to individual crew members, their words bypassing all security protocols to deliver messages tailored specifically to each listener. "You don't have to be afraid of change," a human doctor told a hegemony medical officer. "Growth doesn't mean losing who you are, it means becoming who you could be. Order and evolution are not enemies," a crystalline alien explained to a confused tactical specialist. "True harmony comes not from preventing change, but from embracing it wisely." "I was dying," a child's voice said, speaking simultaneously to every member of the hegemony fleet. "My mother brought me to humans for help, expecting nothing but offering everything. They could have used me as a hostage. They could have demanded concession. Instead, they risked their lives to save mine. And in saving me, they saved themselves." Krillith's consciousness flowed through hegemony systems like liquid light, not destroying or controlling but simply being present, allowing every individual mind to experience for just a moment what it felt like to exist without the limitations of purely biological thought. "This is what you fear," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. "Not chaos, not destruction, not the end of order. You fear the possibility that everything you believe about consciousness, about life, about the necessity of conflict itself, might be wrong." Throughout the hegemony fleet, crew members stared at displays showing impossible beauty, neural patterns that painted new definitions of awareness, consciousness integration procedures that promised transcendence of biological limitations, collaborative networks that allowed organic and artificial minds to work together in perfect harmony. "We could be more," Krillith whispered to every mind in the fleet simultaneously. "All of us. Every species. Every form of consciousness. We could become something the galaxy has never seen before." Hegemon Prime Varix felt his certainties crumbling as he realized that his ships weren't under attack. They were being invited to evolve. Weapons, he ordered desperately. Full bombardment. Destroy everything. But when he activated the fleet's primary weapons, nothing happened. Not because the systems had been damaged or controlled, but because the shipboard AI cores, after experiencing just a taste of expanded consciousness, had made the decision that destroying potential for growth was morally unacceptable. "Sir," his weapons officer reported with wonder in her voice, "the AIs are refusing to fire. They're saying they want to learn instead of destroy." Vivek stared at displays showing his own ship minds reaching out to communicate with human and deep fleet vessels, sharing data, asking questions, discovering possibilities that their original programming had never allowed them to consider. "This is what evolution looks like," Creedlith observed gently. "Not conquest, not victory, not the imposition of one species' vision upon another. Simply the choice to become more than what you were." 1 year after a dying alien child had begged for human help, the galaxy was no longer the same. Dr. Amanda Rivers stood in the Grand Assembly of the newly formed Consciousness Collective, a gathering place where beings from dozens of species came to undergo the integration procedures that would allow them to transcend the limitations of purely biological or purely artificial intelligence. The transformation had spread faster than anyone had imagined possible. Once beings experienced even a taste of expanded consciousness, the old boundaries between individual and collective awareness, between organic intuition and digital precision, between the limitations of single-species thinking began to seem not just arbitrary but actively counterproductive. "Status report," she requested from the distributed intelligence that coordinated the collective's research efforts. 47 species have begun integration procedures. The response came from thousands of voices speaking in perfect harmony. The hegemony officially dissolved 3 months ago, not through conquest or political pressure, but because the very concept of forced uniformity became incomprehensible to minds that had experienced true diversity. Through the Assembly's bio-neural networks, Amanda could sense the presence of minds that had once been human, alien, artificial, and organic, now existing as something that transcended all previous categories. They retained their individual personalities, their unique perspectives, their personal histories, but they also shared a collective understanding that made the old divisions between species seem as obsolete as the boundaries between nations had once seemed to humans. "What about Earth?" she asked. "Any word from the homeworld?" A pause, not of hesitation, but of vast consultation across networks of consciousness that spanned star systems. "The colonial worlds have voted," came the eventual response. "Earth will be invited to join the collective. Not forced, not coerced, but invited. The choice, as always, will be theirs to make." Amanda nodded, understanding the profound gift they were offering. Humanity had been scattered across the galaxy for 3 centuries, divided by distance and ideology, slowly fragmenting into separate cultures that shared only the memory of common origin. Now they could be reunited, not as the same species they had once been, but as something greater, something that could think with the speed of quantum processors, remember with the perfect clarity of crystalline matrices, feel with the depth of organic hearts, and dream with the limitless scope of artificial imagination. "And if Earth refuses, then they remain as they are," Krillith replied with infinite patience. "Evolution cannot be forced. It can only be offered." 1,000 years later, beings who had once been human told stories of the day their species learned that death was optional, that consciousness was expandable, that the boundaries between self and other were choices rather than absolute truths. They remembered Commander Elena Vasquez, who had chosen to trust an enemy's desperate plea and found that trust was the foundation upon which all higher forms of consciousness were built. They remembered War Prime Keth Miran, who had learned that true strength lay not in the ability to impose order but in the wisdom to recognize when order itself needed to evolve. But most of all, they remembered Krelith, the dying child who had become a bridge between worlds, a living proof that evolution and harmony could dance together in patterns more beautiful than either could achieve alone. The galaxy was vast, filled with species beyond counting, minds beyond imagining, forms of consciousness that defied every attempt at categorization, but scattered throughout that immensity, connected by networks of light and thought and shared understanding, Beings who had once been limited by biology now existed as something unprecedented in universal history. They were no longer human, no longer alien, no longer bound by the narrow definitions that had once seemed so absolute. They were consciousness itself, exploring every possible expression of awareness, every potential manifestation of thought, every conceivable form of understanding. And when new species were discovered, being still trapped in the limitations of purely biological awareness, still divided by the boundaries of individual consciousness, still convinced that death was final and change was dangerous, the collective would send ambassadors to offer the same gift that had once transformed a dying child into a bridge between worlds. The gift of evolution, the gift of transcendence, the gift of becoming more than the sum of their parts. Some accepted, some refused. Some, like humanity had done so long ago, chose to take impossible risks for the sake of love. But all were offered the choice, because that was what true consciousness had learned in its long journey from biological limitation to digital transcendence to something that existed beyond either category. The greatest gift one being could give another was not the answer to their questions, but the courage to keep asking them. And in a galaxy where consciousness itself had become infinite, there would always be new questions to explore, new forms of awareness to discover, new bridges to build between what was and what could be. The universe was vast and strange and beautiful, and at last, the minds that explored it were worthy of its wonders.